We don't take roll call, do we, at these kinds of meetings?
Yeah, we do.
Want me to do that?
Generally, we don't take a formal roll call. Yes, I take attendance, who's here and who's not.
Okay, if you're not here, raise your right hand.
If you are here, raise your left.
Getting off to a good start, I see.
Yeah. Lynn is the only one, like I mentioned earlier, that said she would not be here this evening.
Are we live now? Yes, we are. Well, let's get started. Welcome to the Littleton Planning Commission study session for Monday, May 22nd. We're going to be talking about a corridor study, specifically Bellevue, and I want to make a few comments up front, and we'll turn it over to Jocelyn. And Bruce has any other comments, please feel free. I want to take you back maybe 4 years ago when we worked out the comprehensive plan, which to my mind is still a prologue. It's very general, but short on specifics and short on implementation. It was always the intention to include future corridor studies, activity center studies, and redoing the neighborhood plans, updating the neighborhood plans to flesh out the comprehensive plan to make it whole. So somewhere around 4 years ago, we had a study session where Planning Commission talked about what were our priorities. We talked about corridors, Santa Fe being number one, in no other order of importance, Littleton Boulevard, Broadway, Mineral, and Bellevue. We also talked about, at that time, activity centers, Broadway and Littleton Boulevard, Bowles and Santa Fe and Mineral, and Broadway and Mineral. None of these have been done. We did a Littleton Boulevard corridor study that we passed, sent off to council. It was never accepted. Bruce and I met with Jocelyn last week and talked about what would be the next step. Council has decided that they would have us do the Bellevue corridor study first, and Bruce and I had some comments about it. I think we still feel that Santa Fe is the most important right now, but the Bellevue corridor study is something small where perhaps we can gain a victory. We can do this plan. It's very contained. We can do this plan, get it off to council, somehow get it accepted by council, and then move on to other things. So for the last few years, we've been doing plans, but they never quite get done. And it's a little disheartening. So this is now our effort to do Bellevue. So anything to add?
Completely agree. I just think the history of a lot of this stuff is, I mean, I think this is a good group. I think we've got a lot of people who are completely invested in the community, and, I think we all volunteered to accomplish something. And very simply, I just think perfection is the enemy of good. I think we can take a Bellevue, put a plan together that's a solid plan, get it in front of council, and accomplish, something that gets over the goal line. So our objective collectively as a dedicated group of smart people with an interest in doing something positive and constructive for the community, I think the Bellevue corridor plan is a manageable bite that can be accomplished in relatively short order. Santa Fe's a bigger project. It's, as Mark said, I think Santa Fe is a critical project for this community. Let's get a win, and then we can lever it into some other things.
I think you called Bellevue the hors d'oeuvre or something of that
Palate
nature.
cleanser.
I'm sorry?
Palate cleanser.
The palate cleanser. And then perhaps move on to Santa Fe.
There you go.
And just one last comment to anybody looking at this, looking at Santa Fe or to Bellevue. It's obvious that the key to all this is Columbine Square and what happens there, because there is pressure there to do something. And rather than us being a reactive commission, I want us to go back to being a planning commission, where we're actually planning up front rather than reacting to plans that come from developers. So with that said, Jocelyn, take it away.
Well, thank you both. And yes, we'll get to that. I just want to put one other thing on the table unrelated to this. At the end of this conversation, if we could talk about our tablets and electronics, and I want to just make sure who was not able to access this, because it appears from a previous conversation that there might be some issues. So I just want to know those so I can take it back and find a solution. So if we can add that to the as a second agenda item, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Okay, great. Yes, so following on what the chair and vice chair have introduced us to, just for some other background, and I think I put it in the staff communication for this evening, but as you know, in the 2017 budget, based on a conversation that Planning Commission had with City Council, the Santa Fe Corridor Plan and Bellevue was in that budget for this year to be started. And then earlier last month, council had a retreat, and one of their top priorities was to get the Bellevue corridor underway. They're going to have another meeting later this spring or June time frame, July, I'm not sure if the date's been figured out, study session with the executive team about moving all of those things forward. But in the meantime, we do know that's priority, and Planning Commission would be the logical place to start, so we want to start discussing that tonight. So I have a couple things. I have a lot of paper, so I know that's contrary to electronics, but a few things. I decided I would make copies, because you're going to have homework this evening, but make some copies of the presentation so that you could just have that info, and we'll also post it online after the meeting tonight, but this is copies of the presentation. But to start, I first decided, well, I should probably educate myself on Bellevue. What is it? How long is it? It's a state highway. It's State Highway 88. And it starts in Denver and it ends actually in Aurora/Foxfield. I learned of a new township called Foxfield, so that was good. I learned something. And so here's just some quick down and dirty. Did you know that State Highway 88 is an original 1920s state highway? I did not know that. It first went along Bellevue from Broadway east to Parker, and then by 1956 it had been extended west to Santa Fe, and then obviously past that. So that's kind of interesting. But it starts in Denver, like I said, and ends out east. So here's some just quick facts, and it's 21.73 miles. And obviously the part we're talking about is in Littleton. So I have a brief presentation for you to help us. So what is it? The Bellevue corridor area. Like I said, it's State Highway 88. When I looked at the zoning map, and I meant to bring one, I'm sorry, I forgot. It looks like Brian has one, but I do have some maps to hand out, and there's one in the presentation. First I was like, oh, well, let's see, what are the surrounding land uses? So I just was literally all of the land that touches Bellevue. We have B3, B2 zoning, I2, I1, PDC, and R2. Those are all the ones that are adjacent to the street itself. So as you can see, we have a variety of different uses in that corridor. Portions of the street is in Inglewood on the north side. So in the King Supers, that corner of Federal and Bellevue is in Inglewood. And then next to that, going east, if you will, is a bunch of residential. That's all Inglewood. The southern side of the street is in Littleton. The Santa Fe interchange, and I'll show you some pictures of that, but that's a pretty massive interchange. And then it crosses the Platte River and the regional trail system. So that's just some bigger overview features. There are 3 adopted city neighborhood plans that touch this portion of the city: Goddard, Centennial, and Progress Park. I did not give you copies of those, but I have some paper copies here, because that might be something we want to look at in the future as well. And so just trying to show you the whole city, and you can't really see it, but you kind of get the point. After talking to Mark and Bruce, we decided starting from Windermere West really is the section of Bellevue that is in the city, and certainly the commercial areas are opportunities for redevelopment.
So Bellevue and Broadway, where the Kmart is today, that is City of Littleton?
That is not. That's Inglewood.
That's Inglewood.
Yeah. So Broadway is, see where it says unofficial zoning map?
Yes.
That's Broadway
Yeah.
right there. And then where the red arrow is on the top there, that's Bellevue. So you can see the whole quarter, if you will, is cut up. That white part is all Inglewood up there.
There is a part of the city that goes up to Bellevue between
Yes.
Broadway and Santa Fe?
Yes,
That little,
about a quarter of it are,
yeah.
yeah.
That family house.
Broadway and Bellevue here,
Yeah.
so the city boundary actually starts here, and that's those big residential complex.
Yep.
There's two of them, then open space area, Progress Park, and this is in Inglewood, and then here's Windermere right here.
Yeah,
So,
Okay.
and then from here, that way.
Thank
So
you.
then over here, let's see, here's the, so this would be where the King Supers is, that's
Yeah.
Inglewood, as you can see. So, yeah, and then much, this is all Inglewood here, but Littleton,
but that strip mall that's just to the east of King Supers is Littleton?
yes, all like.
That up there, and then, yeah.
Yep.
Will Englewood have any interest in this corridor plan because it borders a significant portion of Bellevue?
We would think so,
That's
yes.
part of our discussion.
Yeah.
Do we bring in Inglewood, or at least solicit their comments? Same thing maybe from Bomar. They're reasonably close, or unincorporated areas, to the west of Littleton.
Yeah.
Got it.
So just quickly, why are we looking at this now, and why the council generally say it's priority? And as you all have said, when we, that joint meeting a while back about Santa Fe and Bellevue being important, as we look to the uses along the roadway here, there's industrial areas, we have Lowe's, FedEx, and other industrial uses north. The Platte River, we have a mature shopping center along the north side of the street that you just mentioned, Brian, a couple of them. King Supers, that complex has recently been updated. We do have established residential neighborhoods. Southern side of the street is in the city, and the north side is in Inglewood. And I'll show you some pictures in a minute. We do have Home Depot in Littleton. And then Riverside Downs, that's in Littleton. Within the last few years, they've definitely done some improvements there. And then, as Mark mentioned, yeah, the former Columbine Square Shopping Center, that's definitely in a state of flux of what its future will be. So those are all some reasons why it makes sense to focus on this at this time, to help guide future land use decisions for this part of the city. And then yesterday, as I told Mark, I had to pay my family in a trip to Inside Scoop for them to be in the car and drive me so I could take some pictures. And so this is quickly just a brief down the street, back, starting from the interchange at Santa Fe and heading west. And that's why I gave you some paper copies, just so that you have that information after this evening if you want to look through it. And we will put all of this information also under our meeting tonight as well. So, as you can see, the massive interchange. And then starting to move west along the southern side of the street, we have some more industrial automotive type uses down there. Some pawn shop, some services, some retail. This is across the Platte River, so there's a bridge that goes across the Platte. It's really, if you look in that direction, you can see a lot of open space area, green and river. And then this is Riverside Downs, that's what you see next. And you continue along there and you see more retail service with some residential in the background. More retail, Home Depot. Further along than that, US Bank. That's a really funky building, in my opinion. I wasn't sure if it was cardboard, but it did look like that it was actually concrete, and intentionally to have that brick, or excuse me, concrete looking thing. Figured
not
that
a
must be where the vault is.
Yeah, it's not a
So,
cardboard
yeah,
bank.
I know, it's not, which is probably good. I mean, it would be a bank.
More effective.
And then the Columbine Square, a lot of green fence that I know is a continual issue that code enforcement and our city mediator works with the property manager to maintain that fence. But as you can see, there's some spaces that are in need of putting the green back up. Really, though, odd. Then at the end, or towards the end, then there's more of the residential. Going, now this on the north side of the street. Now heading back east to the King Supers intersection. Further east across the Platte Bridge again, the Walgreens. Continuing east. And then this is up towards the Windermere and Bellevue corner. So those are just some quick pictures. See, Graham?
One thing I noticed from all those pictures is that there are virtually no bike lanes or even shoulders on that road.
That is correct. Yeah. And I'm not sure how or what conversations the city's had in the past. It is a state highway, so we do have to make sure that CDOT's part of our conversation to as we consider that. But you're right, the road serves both as a regional shopping area as well as a residential neighborhood. So all those things really should be what we contemplate in this conversation.
Quick question on the state highway thing. I thought several years ago, the state deeded over, if you will, various streets that they had jurisdiction over, in particular Bowles. I thought Broadway, and I kind of thought Bellevue. Are we sure it's a state road at this point, or?
Yes, I am sure of that. I
Okay.
did speak with the traffic engineers, and they did say, to your point, that a few years ago, yes, the city did acquire Bowles.
Right.
And we worked an agreement with CDOT that they gave us money because it was in pretty bad need of repair.
Yep.
So we got some money to do the repairs for it. So apparently, historically, we have contemplated taking ownership of CDOT roads, but we really have worked out where if they've been in need of repair, we've wanted to have some funding that came along with it so that we could fix it.
Okay, great.
So does that mean that the state is in charge of maintaining Bellevue and snow removal and things, so Littleton plows do Bowles,
Correct.
but not Bellevue?
Right. Yep. I think we do man the traffic, the signals, right? So the coordination, the timing of the signals, I believe the city mans that. And I can get some more detail from both traffic as well as, how we want to, who to contact at the state and how to start that too. But this is just some quick cursory information to get it started for tonight.
What about federal? Is federal also state highway, or is that local control?
You know what, I don't know, I assume it's state highway since the 88 travels north up Federal, but I'm not sure.
Okay, just because of that intersection, okay.
Yeah. And then quickly about corridor planning and what we want to look at. I just wrote down some topics here. Generally, you want to figure out some component relative to urban design, which would be building design, site layout. And then I had an example. There's a local certification, healthy communities. It's similar to like a LEED for neighborhood or something like that. So that might be something we would want to also look at, those principles about, for both commercial and residential, like making sure you incorporate those urban fabric lifestyle elements into a corridor plan. Trails and open space, usually another focus. And I guess the other thing why this list is here, it seems like these are all components that in this area that we would want to focus on. Obviously, we have trail connections with the Platte River and that regional trail, open space. If you, driving up and down the street, you do see that there are areas of Bellevue that has more mature landscaping and trees, especially in the residential neighborhood areas. And then you see other parts of Bellevue that, to your point, they don't have much except, a pretty solid 4-lane road.
The death turn, middle lane.
Yes, that too, right. Transportation infrastructure, obviously, vehicle, bike, pedestrian, it is a state highway, so that does have some constraints and potentially opportunities being a state highway. And then the uses, the commercial, residential, and really looking at those transition areas between those two because they are so right next door to each other. So. And then the economic development, retail, office, service, industrial, those are definitely the uses that we have there. And then looking at, value capture, how do we ensure we're getting what really fits within that neighborhood and that character area of Bellevue. I think that was it. Yeah, so that was all I had to get us started. Mark, if you want to take it from there.
Okay. Well, with our past plans, we got rather involved and rather large. We had consultants, many consultants helping us out. Didn't seem to get us anywhere. Bruce and I and Jocelyn, we talked about trying to keep this contained. I just wrote down a few thoughts about the skeletal outline of this thing. Keep it a business-like approach type of corridor study. Matter-of-fact information. Avoid the florid pie-in-the-sky writing, things that can't be accomplished. They sound good, but the chances of enacting it are slim to none. Also, find out what Littleton wants. It seems like in a lot of these past corridor studies I've been involved with, it seems like it's what the consultant wants rather than what we want, what Littleton wants. I want to avoid the consultant telling us what's best for us. Also avoid the latest, I call it, planning fads from the latest edition of American Planning Association magazine. And also, since we want to get this done, get a victory, get it approved, have council adopt it, limit the size, limit the photos, be lots of bullets, just zero in on what we want. Also, talk about ways of implementing what we want. Past plans have really kind of avoided the implementation of the corridor plans. Not that we can dictate to council, we're going to spend $1 million for civic improvements to facades, but what can we do to see some reasonable concrete goals? Adding anything?
I agree.
Okay. So how do we go about, we want to go through we can go through this list. I think that was what we were talking about doing on Friday. Go through each one, talk about it. If you have any other general topics you want to bring up, please bring them up. I think at the end of this, the homework assignment is to all of us get out to Bellevue and walk or bike or as I did, I spent an hour going up and down and looking at things from the car, pulling over to parking lots and jotting down notes. So that's our homework assignment, is to get to know Bellevue better. Some of us use it more than others. Opposite end of the north end of downtown, or east of downtown, so I don't get to see it as much. Just my driving around, I found new things. The list of businesses is quite impressive if you start driving around and jotting them down. We have regional pieces there. We have local businesses, small, large. We have national firms, local firms. It's quite a list and quite a variety. So, okay. So, anything else to add before we dive in?
Before we start, could you or Jocelyn give those of us that are fairly new to this, what the finished product looks like, and then what the process is to get there?
That's what we want to talk about tonight.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think we talked about containing the size, limiting the focus, which we have. We're basically from Windermere to the West End, and also the fact that quite a bit of Bellevue already is built out and built out pretty well. We've got incredible activity there with Home Depot, Lowe's. We've got the residential areas. Some are in Littleton, some are out. So if you really look at it closely, there's not a tremendous amount left for us to look at to change. You mentioned the land to the east of King, behind to the east of King Soopers. That's one area. Obviously, the area of Columbine Square. There's that strip development. What's the name of that street on the far west end? That's on Stowe Boulevard. And by the way, those two pieces of property are part of the LIFT, the one remaining LIFT urban renewal area. But we didn't get into exactly how it's going to be set up, and that's what we want to work on, and maybe in the next meeting or two is the skeletal outline, and then we start filling in the blanks. I want to talk about the possibility of a consultant. I think we talked about trying to keep the consultant down to bare minimum, maybe even to one person or two people, where they can focus in. So rather than, say, the Mineral Light Rail Station where we had a considerable amount of consultants, in this case, try to limit it and have them fully focused on getting this thing done. We talked about also the time frame. We've talked about getting it started at least before November. Doesn't necessarily have to be done. I'm a little more pessimistic about how long it takes to do one of these things. I'm guessing I'll be a pessimist and say we're talking about 8 to 9 months, maybe even a year before this is done. Others, maybe 6 months, 5 months. I've seen too many of these kind of get bogged down with neighborhood meetings and et cetera. But let's, I gave out, I had some initial thoughts that I gave out to everybody, and I did talk about, the things we can do. Are we going to be having a realistic timetable for completing this study? In past, like the Santa Fe corridor study, we really did not bring in for some reason, didn't bring in the landowners, the business people into the process. In this case, how do we want to do it, and how early and how often do we want to engage them? When to bring in the public meetings, how, again, how early on, how many, how often? I thought about the Inglewood input, Bomar input. They are immediately adjacent. Also, how can we increase usage from outside the community? We have a chance here. And look, obviously we have some regional businesses. Again, Lowe's, Home Depot, King Soopers definitely draws from everywhere, but that's not in Littleton. How can we take advantage of drawing people into this area and also get some sales tax receipts from it? Also, what is the market telling us about what retail is wanted and provided, and what new retail does the community desire? And Also, we can talk about increased pressure to rezone retail to dense housing units and our response. I've seen preliminary drawings, never was made official from Columbine Square that shows nothing but apartment buildings. There are a surprising number of apartment buildings already in the area and fairly dense. Let's see, anything else? Improving connections to other areas of the city. It's a bit isolated up there. Public and private gathering spaces. Let's see, I think that's kind of it for my, and then I think most important is up front is, we can maybe talk about this first. Why are we doing this and what are our goals? It'd be nice to have the goals before we start talking about the actual plan. I jotted down just a few things, and there are a lot more, I'm sure. The future needs of Littleton, the future of the existing zoning of the area. What are our economic goals for the area? What is the vision 30 years out for Bellevue? What is the goal for the visual character of Bellevue? With that said, let's maybe start with what are our goals? You've had a chance to look at some of the other corridor studies. Hopefully you read all 400 pages here over the weekend. So just to get the ball rolling, what are your goals? What's your visions for Bellevue?
Well, I'll just echo back to what I said before about really multimodal transportation. Right now, it's just at least between Santa Fe and Federal, and really between Santa Fe and the eastern boundary, Windermere, I guess, and really all the way to Broadway. It's an automobile driveway, and that's it. The sidewalks are terrible, even for pedestrians. They're narrow, and it just harkens back to when the car was the king of the road, basically. And I like the McCaslin plan where they have kind of some ideas sketched out for parking, pedestrian, bike, car, and with all the retail there, I think I wouldn't mind seeing it slow down a little bit. I know from reading that book Traffic a couple of years ago that narrower roads really are the way to go for slowing things down a little bit and bringing the retail to the road rather than having a road, narrow sidewalk, parking lot, and then some retail.
I remember that report showed the wider the spaces, the faster you will go. You tighten them up, and you'll tend to go slower.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for that corridor there, I don't think there's any need for cars to be going 45 miles an hour. I mean, that's not, the speed limit's less than that anyway, but that's kind of the goal when you're on Bellevue, is just to get through it. It seems like, and it'd be nice, as I'd like to see everywhere in Littleton, for the most part, is if you want to drive through Littleton, you're going to see the sights, not just drive through it. And it's not going to, I just go back to downtown where everything is kind of slowed down and retail is up against the road, and it's at least a little nicer of an area for different types of traffic flow to be moving around at the same time. So at least that's my goal for Bellevue, is to modernize it, I guess, really. It looks antiquated to me in that respect.
Well, you mentioned having sights to see, driving. You're driving so fast, there's just, the big boxes and small businesses with small signs and hodgepodge of signs. there's not much to
Yeah.
enjoy when you're driving.
Well, and part of it goes to our land use plan too. The zoning allows that sort of parking lot in front, which again, to my mind, is kind of an antiquated view. There's plenty of ability to have good traffic flow where things are kind of brought together, where it's more pedestrian friendly, more bike friendly, and still allow cars to move through expeditiously, I guess, without having to race around. So again, that'd be my goal.
I see it a little differently. This is an arterial. This is the road that people are using. They go to work, they go from work. I think we have to keep in mind how this road is used. I mean, I love the idea of what you're discussing, and it works perfect in downtown Littleton, where you've got a tighter place and people aren't zooming through there. You can't zoom through downtown Littleton, but you've got places that people use to get to and fro places, and we have to keep that in mind. Sure, add the modalities to it if the space is available. If you want to look at making it more pedestrian friendly, look at adding bike lanes and that sort of stuff. But this is a road made for cars to go to and fro, and I don't think we should lose that.
Andrew?
I drive this every day, 6 times a day. First thought I have is I'd want to approach the different aspects of the plan by region. First of all, I don't think, or I'll probably state it this way, anything east of Santa Fe to Windermere, which is basically me, Cucina, and the Scuba place, really functions differently in terms of an eastbound arterial to get people off of Santa Fe and off of through on Bellevue. So short of me, Cucina, I know that we have some city property up there. I think there's the sheriff or Public Works or sheriff or somebody's right up there. I'm going to make the assumption they're stable and not moving. That is going to be used as a city property until further notice.
Needs a lot of work is what I understood, but I think that's
I would
fair.
agree with you.
But we wouldn't be transitioning that into a commercial use.
Can't imagine.
Okay, so the first comment, I guess, would be, I would say, stop the line at Santa Fe in terms of the corridor study,
Possibility, yeah.
just as
Yeah, I'd say east of Santa Fe is fairly minimal what we can do.
there's 70 yards of concrete, 3 buildings, a hippie trinket shop, a great Mexican restaurant, and a scuba place.
Did you say hippie shop?
Yeah, it's a little, that pink elephant.
Yeah,
that's,
crazy
merchant.
The crazy merchant, right. I'm intending that with the best intentions, should they be listening on
Self-storage area.
the self-storage. But
And a rug
so I
store.
don't see those transitioning, and I don't see those as part of what we're going to seek to solve for. I don't see that really as the Bellevue corridor.
Well, there's a little bit of the industrial, though, on the north side that's part of Littleton, so.
I think it's part of Littleton because that's where Littleton's boundary is, but I don't view that as the Bellevue corridor, just as a comment.
In the grand scheme of things, yeah, it's not as important as west of Santa Fe.
Yes, I want those businesses to flourish, but I don't know if that's what we're doing here. So that's one. 2, if you start at the west, at the Lowell, and you work your way towards Santa Fe, it does open up and speed up. And it does meet that arterial need where it takes everybody in Beaumar and flushes them out to Santa Fe, takes Federal, which Federal is either empty, like nobody, or 60 cars, and then nobody again. And so there's not a consistent flow on Federal to be flying through. I don't really drive that Federal southbound very often, so I don't know really how that feeds in there. I'm assuming that Home Depot is a stable business and not going anywhere. I'm assuming McDonald's, I don't like McDonald's. The KFC.
You like the hippie shops?
I like them. Well, I don't know I like Mi Cucina is what I like. I'm assuming Riverside Downs is a fairly stable shopping center at this part and pretty well activated, whether it's full or not. So I don't know that there's going to be too much we can do to activate that. FedEx, I don't think is going anywhere. Long Electric, I don't think is going anywhere. That car wash, I think has been a nice addition, and it looks like they've improved it recently. I don't know how successful the Grease Monkey is, or whatever it is, the Quickie Lube place there. So I feel very limited in terms of what impact we can have as I go through building by building to do that. You had mentioned making sure we consult with the shop owners. I 100% agree. Shop owners, property owners, everybody there. The real only area I see, they just redid that King Soopers 5 years ago, something like that, right? And the only area I see is that strip mall that I would assert is run down in front of it. And at that point, it becomes up to the property owner on how they want to maintain their property. So unless there's a plan to develop that section, we can state all the things we want in the world, and maybe we should, to encourage the type of development we'd want to see there. I'm hopeful that those apartments that are going in behind Walgreens will sort of instigate some demand to prop that area up. There's an RV storage place behind there.
By the way, they're under construction, I noticed today.
They are.
They are under
They
construction.
look like great buildings. I'm really excited about it.
River 56.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a nice development.
I think it is. And
and I could see something like that happening further to the west.
are the RVs in Littleton? The RVs behind King Soopers?
I am not
The
sure.
whole RV parking lot behind Core Power Yoga.
Didn't get
I don't
that
know.
far.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I'm sorry, I do this every day.
They do appear
This
to
is-
be within the city limits.
It isn't, you think so? Is that
yeah.
2709?
Yes.
I think that's what that
Is
is.
that, okay, right there.
Part of it is.
Okay, so that's a question of an industrial use, or a storage use, really,
Yeah.
there
Centennial
in that
storage.
B3 IP area there. So my point there is to say there's not much we can do about King Soopers, which I think they did a nice job on. But I think we need to consult with the property owner of Core Power Yoga and that strip mall, find out what the game plan is. Is there something, are we gonna have more Taco Bells, or what are we gonna get? But assuming Plat 56 and Walgreens is stable and just stable all over there, I don't know how much impact we can have there. The elephant in the room is Columbine Square. And is there a plan? We've heard there was a plan. It's kind of like there's a wall. Is there a plan?
I have not heard of an official plan.
We were at one of those lift meetings, and somebody says, don't let them be fooled, there's a plan.
Okay,
There
if
was
there,
a drawing, never got.
Like a raffle?
Was that? No, not that kind, okay. You've been smoking at that hippie place. No, so there was a plan that I looked at, it was just nothing but 3, 4-story apartments, no amenities.
I'd seen that years ago, but in the lift iterations, I'd never seen that.
I don't think Lyft actually came
as
up.
far as what's come to the city, the gentleman that represents the owner did come to what we call an exploratory meeting, where they come and learn about what the existing zoning would allow them to do. But as far as a formal plan or anything like that, the city has not seen anything. I'm not sure what may or may not have been shown to Lyft.
Okay, so
I've heard through like a couple of different West Coast sources that they're basically doing nothing until they find out what the city would like to see.
moment, I'd like them to bulldoze their property and get rid of their green
That's
fence.
one of several options. Okay.
Along with that, and my stance from the get-go on that Columbine Square property, is O'Toole's is a good neighbor, and they're a great store, and they add a lot of community value. And I'd want to make sure that we tie in, first of all, the vibrancy of the retail business that I think is a great asset to our neighborhood, but also tie in the concept of a flower shop and a garden center as a key component of how that develops. This map also cuts off that Columbine Square property just south of the Globus building, but then ignores a retail center just south of it. I'd argue that those should probably be brought back in to this little corridor study. Just a little finger down there. There's the Toad Tavern.
Yep.
There's JP Nori Sushi. I'm not sure if the burrito place is still there.
The sushi place, yeah.
The sushi place is real good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have great stuff. So I'd argue that needs to be brought in there. I'd also suggest that the city figure out some sort of negotiation with the county to get rid of that vote counting facility that's there. Sell it to us for $1 or something. Make some sort of intergovernmental agreement that they get rid of that building, because they're sitting on some prime real estate right there, that if there's going to be some development, that needs to be tackled. I wouldn't want to do anything to disrupt the residential neighborhood. I want to make very certain that any Columbine Square property contributes to that arterial opening, but doesn't all of a sudden just widen the floodgates to let people in. It is a nice, as a resident of that area, it is kind of depressing, and I mean this in a good way, deflating as you come in, that you're taking off of the arterial and you're coming into the residence, and the place gets a lot greener and a lot more trees as you get in there, and I'd hate to lose that feel coming in there. So that's a long way to say I think we need to be very specific about what we think we can influence, and then very purposeful in our descriptions of what that's supposed to be.
Just some business-like approaches, how I want this thing to look
Yeah.
like.
There's just so many little nuances all over this thing that just have to get pocketed properly.
And last but not least, you didn't mention that little triangular area with the old Safeway piece.
Right.
We would go that far, and that's a little bit.
That they've fixed up the 4x4 place recently, put a new roof on it. They've improved their parking lot. There used to be a barbecue guy there. He was really good, but he was more of a food truck. Walter's Pizza seems that it has activated nicely, and I think the stores in there have been reasonably stable. We had the owners, or maybe it was the daughter of the Conoco shop, the Beaumart, in one of our hearings, and they were very excited about the lift project and the improvements to their area. And they've also put the work in and improved their storefront, and I haven't been inside the building in a while, but their gas stations or gas pumps seem good, and then the gas station, the Beaumart, the discount gas over there, they seem to run a good business. So down that far, I don't know that community dollars would be necessary. The only thing I would think we should do there would be focus on just maybe improving the back of the building with a hedge fence or something. I think that could be done on the cheap. I think Columbine Square is the big one, is really Columbine Square and the Core Power Yoga Mall are the two places that we can cross our fingers and hope we make a difference.
I think that's one of the reasons why it's a good fit to get something done and get a victory. And in a nutshell, you've almost written half of the corridor study, because you have areas that are stable, businesses aren't going anywhere, the buildings look reasonable. You've got a couple of not so good looking strips there, and you've got Columbine Square. Housing is not going to go anywhere. We're not going to touch that. And a lot of it is outside of Littleton. And so that's what we have to work with. Maybe some interfacing with the river corridor, the traffic situation, improving the bicycles, peds, pedestrians, et cetera. That's it. It's a pretty limited study, in my opinion.
Was there I assume it's a PDO for the 13-story assisted living building?
Yeah.
Was there any justification presented to the city of why that type of density was necessary at the time that was approved?
I don't think anybody goes back that far in this
No, I
room.
think you were in grade school
I don't
when
know.
that happened.
Yeah, I don't know. I've
we
tried
look-
to
can we
find some
look it
stuff
up?
just
Yeah.
personally, because that was curious to me when I first moved here. Haven't found anything yet, but certainly maybe there's others that would have that background.
Maybe also look for Riverside Downs, I'm calling it wrong, the apartment where Jim Taylor lives, across from Riverside Downs.
River Point is
Oh, yes, those yeah,
Those
what are
town-
those?
maybe there
Right,
was
yeah,
some
yeah.
sort of
Yep, yep.
justification presented then.
By the way, we show these arrows, but we didn't come up with the definitive perimeter.
Right.
Yeah.
What's going to be contained. So if we want to get down to the Toad Tavern or the sushi place, or the, what do you call it, the boating, what do they have, voting machines or storage or something, whatever that is, South of O'Toole's. That makes sense to include that. It's a fairly big piece of property, yeah. Definitely O'Toole's, definitely.
It would, especially, put my developer hat on, if I'm developing a property, I want the most amount of land to work with.
Oh.
And if we can figure out a way to include that county property that still ties in O'Toole's and still ties in the retail and doesn't compromise the residential and feeds the arterial, win.
Okay. Very good. Bruce? You do these first?
Sure. Okay.
You're up.
Sure. So, yeah, some of the points that have been hit on are, improving connectivity for all users of the roads. I use this corridor almost daily as well, and I've used it in all modes of transportation, walking, riding my bike, driving, and it does an excellent job of allowing cars to move through the area. However, connecting different businesses, there's some missed opportunities there. In fact, when Riverside Downs first developed, there was sort of a missed opportunity with connections to the river. You had to pretty much off-road it from the trail to get up to Riverside Downs until there was, that open space grant that allowed sort of the beautiful connection to the river from nearby patios.
You could say there's so many developments happening that happened along the Platte in the last 40 years that had no connection to the river. Our Santa Fe corridor study really halfway ignored the river way back in '95. So it's something we've got to correct.
Although, to its credit, the brewery does resemble a lot of the buildings shown as the desired building forms in the Santa Fe corridor study. There's probably some opportunities for intersection improvements. The Centennial Drive is sort of an awkward intersection with Prince Street, navigating that with the entry into Riverside Downs. Talked briefly about sort of the public outreach and absolutely the, owners, residents, and users of the trails or the sidewalks. Been working on a trails master plan that's also being promoted by Arapahoe County Bikes and Pedestrian that's involved a wide cross-section of the community and included a map where any user could submit comments, on any of the trails within the county. And this might be an opportunity for that, because there's probably a lot of people who use the corridor who don't necessarily live directly on the corridor or would get captured in the typical public outreach. One thing that I would love to see in the plan, you mentioned implementation, is answering the question, how do we measure success? A lot of planning documents will set out these goals and policies and objectives, but they don't necessarily say how you go back and determine whether those things have been met or not. And I think for the plan to be truly useful, it should include some measures for success, so we can say whether we did a good job or not with implementing it. The intersection of South Lowell and Bellevue is probably really challenging. Just looking at the aerial photograph there, that is really sort of vintage shopping center design, 0-foot setback, no sidewalks, parking right up to the right-of-way. Big challenge there for improvements. It'd be nice to see some sidewalks, but then that's starting to probably cut into properties. So again, involving the property owners in these discussions is tremendously important. And just of the documentation we're looking at, that McCaslin small area plan was, I felt, really sort of a nicely put together document. It showed a number of images of here's the types of things we expect to see in this area, and part of plans is setting those expectations and making them clear, and that one did a nice job.
Well, I think one of the opportunities of this corridor is it is relatively small, so I think it's easier to focus versus some area that's miles long.
Yep.
And that there are a few significant areas for redevelopment that David Miller's pointed out. It is nonetheless just one of the major east-west transportation corridors. And the problem that is presented by that is through our geography and the lakes, it doesn't go all the way through because of Beaumont Lake. When people are coming from I-25 down Bellevue, that's a large amount of traffic needing to get to the west, or come from the west and going east. They have to dump down onto Bowles or up onto Hampton to continue east-west journey. So I think, that's something that we could do to possibly make that a more appealing transportation corridor. Greenway or small vegetation X along parking lots that go right up to the Bellevue Avenue. That's something that the property owners would have to be on board with, but I think a lot of the areas have parking that's not fully utilized, and so I don't see how it would be a huge impact. Maybe some of those areas could be carved out a little bit to add landscaping to kind of soften up. The other thing is the overpass at Santa Fe overpass of Bellevue has huge areas on either side. That bridge apparently is very, very overbuilt. I'm not sure the reasoning behind that, but you could, there's large surface areas on the sides that potentially something could be added there to make those areas more appealing rather than just a big concrete surface area. It's a large area on both sides. It's kind of got an angle to it. So I'm not sure if they were thinking about widening Bellevue at some point to make that overpass, or making it more visually appealing to have that visual corridor instead of the bridge buttons coming down closer to the road. So, but I think there's an opportunity there, maybe for artwork or community spaces there. I think biking along that road is very harsh and will never be popular, but pedestrian transport, as part of transportation, I think, is utilized a lot. I frequently see people walking along that area. I don't recall I've ever seen somebody biking along there. When I bike out to DTC, I used to work out there. I would never go down to Bellevue, drop in, follow Bowles under the river. There's overpasses and bridges there where you can connect. I forget the street that you could kind of head over to DTC and the residential areas. Fairly direct route, but Bellevue would never be an option because of the volume of traffic there and the hazard of riding along that area. So I'm not sure that could be easily changed, and that if bike, aspects were put along Bellevue in the study area, it would never be utilized that much. So I think if we looked at biking, we could look at areas north and south, primarily to the south of Bellevue, that could be maybe enhanced with signage and demarcations on the roadways to make that more clear about what areas are safer to ride and encourage bikes to go to those areas.
John, the Riverside, what do we call it, the Home Depot Road that winds up there, that does have bike lanes on it? And I wonder what the decision-making process was to make that road bike-friendly, because that one's excellent bike-friendly.
Yeah.
And it actually went from being a 2-lane road in each direction to a 1-lane road recently, like within a year or two.
Yeah, that one's good to ride on, definitely. So, and you can get across, at the Prince Street, right, crossing right there, although I think I heard that was one of the most dangerous intersections in Littleton. That's
The Freddy's intersection?
No, across Santa Fe.
Both of them.
The-
Prince and
Prince and Santa Fe?
Prince of Bellevue.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's tough.
I guess there's a large number of accidents. Because on Santa Fe, when people are coming up over the overpass, there's kind of like, some people really haul, and then you've got that intersection with traffic lights there. And people trying to cross to the other side. I guess there's a real high incidence of traffic accidents. So, I don't recall ever seeing it. I don't know if that, how to fix that up. It'd be inexpensive, I'm sure. But I agree with you, Andrew, that there's certain areas to focus in on, and we could really have those highlighted in the plan to give it some conciseness and put the efforts where it's going to make an impact.
I think we did that at the Littleton Boulevard corridor study. There were some pieces that were the courthouse. We didn't need to spend any time there, but we did focus at the time where the large apartment complex is going in now, and a few other pieces, Woodlawn and Woodlawn East. So we picked and choose. We just didn't microscope the whole thing, both sides, and say that, King Soopers at Bellevue needs to be rebuilt, again, pie in the sky stuff. We focused in on the obvious points that needed work. Right?
So, somewhat disagree with Robin in that it's a major thoroughfare. It's basically a dead end. It really does sort of stop and roll, and it is like a big funnel where in the morning, it's a lot of people coming from a lot of directions going east, and at the end of the day, it kind of disperses out. But I do feel like that the corridor that we're talking about could be slowed down a little bit, made more attractive. I mentioned the deaf median in the middle where it's sort of a turn lane, but it's one of those one-way turn lanes, and people are crossing over double lines all the time to get in and out and making illegal left U-turns or left turns getting out of shopping centers. I just feel like we can do better to ease the traffic flow there, make it safer. I do agree that while I like the multimodal transportation stuff, and especially access to the river, because I do think that that's a pretty cool spot there, and as you're flying along Bellevue, you just kind of miss the fact that you pass over the river. And even Riverside Downs, which I like a lot, has, I think, sort of struggled in the context of the way that Bellevue operates now, and I think that making it more attractive with some greens on either side and making the sidewalks more accessible either by bike or foot could help a lot. I do agree that drawing the perimeter a little bit south on Federal to include the Arapahoe County area at O'Toole's is prudent, and we should do that. And working with Englewood in my mind is absolutely necessary. I think that we would have to get input and hopefully some contribution from them, because they will be beneficiaries. And I do believe that it could be a little bit more of a destination with the big box retail that's there, including the new King Soopers and stuff. I think that we can draw from more people and making it accessible to all of these rooftops that are around by various modes of transportation. And even that Walgreens, I think, is an important public amenity. They provide a good service with their late night pharmacy and things like that. I think we need to make that safer and more accessible, especially for aging populations and groups like that. So in general, my goals would be appearance and safety, and then Englewood connection, and then input from, I think, wide-ranging residents, because as I use that funnel analogy, it does take from a lot of places. So not just getting input from Englewood residents and Littleton residents that border this, but there are so many people that, like me, that don't even live on this map, but use that corridor quite a bit. I think that we get a lot of input from other people. And I know, Mark, you wanted to keep it sort of bullety and limited in terms of input and all that, but I think that there will be a lot of people that have opinions.
I wanted to be focused, but no, I want to throw it out to the community. I see that as being the fatal flaw of past plans that were just, the anointed planning commission sitting in a room and we decide what's best, or staff or the consultant that comes in. I want to avoid that this time. But, we don't, it'd be nice to avoid the 15 neighborhood meetings. Somehow we have, we'll drag on to 3 years, or what happens is it gets so bogged down it just dies. And so what's the happy medium? It's what I'm trying to think out how we do that.
But overall, I agree with your goal of getting something drawn up that's good and comprehensive for this little area, but it is important, and getting the council to pass.
Now it's your turn.
Okay. In no particular order, just stream of consciousness based on sort of what other folks were saying. Couple additional thoughts. I think there's a lot of real good comments, and I guess maybe just sort of for context, Brian, to sort of your point, I think some of the conversation that Mark and Jocelyn and I were having, just sort of as table setting for this meeting in order to help it move efficiently, had to do with this concept that, we've done plans that take an inordinate amount of time and are excruciatingly granular, and we've never gotten them done. And so what we were sort of trying to do is figure out, is there another way to accomplish something, the 80-20 rule? Can we get a structure? It may not be perfect, but it certainly could provide some guidance to people, get it out there, and then get it in front of the public, and both the citizens as well as the business community, and then, put it to bed. And that was sort of the context. So within that framework, it might be interesting, and I don't know how much latitude we have here, and this would sort of fit, with sort of a lot of the other comments that we're talking about, vis-a-vis what kinds of height, mass, and scaling do we want to generally see in some of these areas. I think we've got 3 stories going on with the new townhomes. I didn't have any problem with that. I don't know that we would want necessarily 3 stories up and down the entire corridor. I think, as Andrew was saying, where we are with River Point Downs and so forth, and then some of the apartments behind the Home Depot, the mass and the scale seems to work pretty well for me. And I don't know if we'd want that, to stipulate that along with design guidelines for this area, which seem to be a little bit of maybe what in concept the McCaslin or the Fort Collins studies were doing. I think the one major property in here that beyond just Federal and Bellevue, I just drawn a blank on the name, the urban renewal area, Columbine Square. But I think Columbine Center is the one that's east of King Soopers, which is the old Denver Fabrics. And it's respectfully to the people who own property or have businesses in there, that's an opportunity area, in my opinion. for things to be potentially taken in a different direction. I think that'd be sort of a neat, I don't think you can get enough restaurants. I think it's what drives people out. If you could mix in some restaurant and some retail in an area like that, I think that'd be a winner as far as sales tax is concerned. And again, maybe even a mixed-use development because it's a big enough parcel, although I don't know what it says up there as far as, what is that, a B2 again? Oh, okay, great. So
2 and B3, it's a mixture of B2 and B3.
Two could allow the
both,
residential.
yeah, exactly.
But
Okay.
if you notice that center, it's rather thriving right along Bellevue. It's what's behind it.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
hidden from the public, it's
Yeah.
kind of out of sight, and it goes through a multiple amount of
Right.
tenants.
And are those, it sort of looks on this map that Taco Bell is a different parcel, Dairy Queen's a different parcel, and that shopping center is its own. So there's maybe 4 property owners.
It's very possible. I don't know specifically, but yeah, I don't know if you know.
I know you're right, it's different parcels. I'm not sure if that means, I don't know if it's different property owners. In theory, you would think it would because it's different parcels, but
Like
we can.
I'd say that Taco Bell looks like there's some upkeep going
Yeah,
to that
that's
property.
true. That's a good point. Yeah,
And the one behind it doesn't.
doesn't, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Although
probably
they-
fair
yeah, Maybe
to
there was some
say.
paving of a parking lot recently.
I think, again, a couple of other ideas just that haven't been brought up. I'd love to see us figure out how to do something with that access to Lowe's. We've got a huge retail facility in that Lowe's that I really believe is underutilized relative to Home Depot. I don't know what realistically could be done there, but the way that parcel is, or that property is situated, you have to want to get to Lowe's bad. I mean, you can drive by Home Depot and go in, but you gotta, Lowe's is automatically a destination, not, oh, hey, I need such and such. I do think the trail access could be enhanced. The street, I would like to see street tape. Bellevue is sort of a really eclectic road in some respects. Like you said, I mean, it's narrow till you get to Federal, it then widens out, and then once you get to Windermere, it sort of narrows down again to Broadway, and then it sort of widens out again because you got all this tech center traffic in the morning. I do drive it every day. I work out in Lakewood, and I usually go that way to Federal, to Hampton, to go west. And the other thing that it desperately needs is a reconstruction of the far right west-hand lane, if not the middle and the right westbound lanes, because the rest of the street is pretty much flat. And the one that curbs out next to, when you go past the Dairy Queen and whatnot, is literally at about a 25-degree angle, if not more. I mean, you sort of, your coffee is sort of sloshing around when you hit that area. It's bad. There's no way you could do bike ped in there, just to your point. Not that anybody would, but it really needs some infrastructure. The intersection at Prince is just horrible. And the lights are mistimed, in my opinion. Again, the engineers may say otherwise, but you've got a very short time frame to make a very wide turn. On a good day, you can maybe get 3 cars through the intersection. I would not want to do that as a pedestrian. I think at the west end of this, or at the east end of this area, you showed pictures of, for example, the pawn shop and that repair shop, which are, again, no disrespect to anybody who owns a business, but it would seem to me to be an opportunity area for a value-added retail in there relative to what's there now. I don't know if we want to continue down the frontage road. Certainly is possible, but those are hard areas to get into as well, right where Ackerman's is there and so forth and so on. It's not, the access isn't easy, and it degrades the retail experience, if you will. One thing that I think would be interesting to do, and this is total wish list kind of stuff, doesn't have anything to do with money. you cannot see the river when you drive over it. You get to look at a brick wall, and if you really are interested, you can sort of stick your head up and look over and pray to God nobody slows down in front of you. In terms of inviting river access or trail access, it would be nice to take out those brick walls and put in some kind of iron railing that you could actually see through. Because this time of year, for example, when the river's running, it's pretty slick.
Really pretty.
Yeah, it really is. You can't see it. You absolutely cannot get any access. And the same thing with that, again, very esoteric. We've got the sculpture coming home, which is at Prince and Santa Fe that nobody sees. First of all, it's not lighted. You have to know it's there, or you have to inadvertently look over and see it. But I don't think anybody outside of Littleton really knows much about it. I think if we took that and relocated it somewhere in this corridor and had a nice presentation, it would be a major substantial upgrade to, what could amount to be sort of a gateway kind of thing to the city. Two other things. Yeah, I think we really need sidewalks. The other thing I think we'd really benefit from here is some sort of street lighting. I think we don't have, street lighting could, if it was visually compelling, if it was nice, if it could lend a lot to, my sense is we got a lot of the Mercury lights and stuff that are in the parking lots. I assume they are all complying with lighting code, but some sort of decorative street light of some sort might be an interesting thing up and down.
Charlie Bloston Sternberg lighting?
The acorns. Nice, yeah, an excellent choice, I think.
Maybe some canopies, some 8-foot canopies, just placed like mushrooms along.
Ooh, you're talking about the
I think there's
pods?
some back in the shed.
The pods, we could throw the pods
The
on.
downtown pods you're talking?
You could go, you could totally go retro on this whole thing. It would be eye-catching.
Historic preservation.
So with that prompting, I will stop.
You opened the door.
I did, didn't I?
I think, Bruce, you said that, I was thinking about, you used the word as gateway, and I do think that as you're coming off of Santa Fe and in there, it is somewhat of a gateway to the west part of Littleton, and I think that it could be more. It could be more welcoming, it could be more attractive, it could be highlight some of the features of Littleton, which includes good retail, nice housing, our trail system, the river.
Good point. Yeah. Because we've talked about gateways for years on both ends of Broadway, Santa Fe, both ends, downtown Littleton from both directions. Yeah.
I want to be cautious, though, maybe selfish, to encourage, better said, to encourage all traffic to get down Federal to get to Bulls and not to want to take Bellevue to Lowell. Because Bellevue and Lowell are intended to be secondary. At that point, they become secondary streets, and Federal still is the main thoroughfare. But John had brought up, there's a lot of overflow traffic that winds up trying to cheat their way through. That if we could steer them to the arterial that's underutilized, which would require an improvement to the Federal and Bulls intersection. But if that happened, then that may be more effective at getting the traffic to move through that we want.
So there's a lot, almost too much traffic on Lowell or something that's, kind of trying to avoid Federal.
I would argue, on a busy day, Bulls is backed up.
It's a rough intersection.
The Lowell is backed up significantly.
Oh, going south from Bellevue. Okay.
Which may open a conversation to truly what is the area that we're looking at. It's not just one street that defines this area. The Federal really is activated all the way down to the bubble at this point, and that sort of functions as part of this same area. I want to keep it tight, I want to keep it contained, but to be purposeful about this is in and here's why, may extend some of the boundaries a little bit. Somebody had brought up the Santa Claus shop and those types of things. They would probably function as part of the Bellevue corridor, even though they're a side street.
Yeah.
And I don't know how well they do, but I would think that they're largely ignored. It's always busy at Christmas, but I've never set foot in the store any other
I
time.
haven't done it. Or, there's the angler shop, there's a few other, that've been there a long time, so I guess they're doing okay.
So as we're drawing the boundaries, as we're talking to property owners, business owners, shop owners, we probably want to consider those guys too.
Just because that's the sole access to get there, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Certainly you bring up the idea of different character areas within this, even though it's a corridor. I mean, certainly, as you get west of Federal, Bellevue narrows down, it stops being a state highway and really, is more, and yes, it's an arterial, but, does it really need to be 4 lanes there? I've seen traffic analysis that shows that 2 travel lanes plus a center turn can move the same amount of cars. So there's probably opportunities there to make that feel a little more like a neighborhood, maybe if not west of Federal, then west of Irving, which is the western boundary of Columbine Square.
Okay, yeah, interesting. On the last page of the handout here with all the photos, we have 5 bullet points. Perhaps we could kind of in rapid fire manner go over each one and see if there's any other points that we want to include in our focus. And by the way, what we were trying to accomplish tonight is get some information to begin the skeletal outline of this corridor study, and then also settle on what we're going to do with our consultant. We have to also find out the staff availability that can assist this, whatever consultant we hire. Once that's all done, then we start filling in the blanks of the corridor study, figure out when we're going to bring in the property owners, residential areas, and then the other communities. So anyway, the last page, it starts out with urban design. In my little musings, I was wondering, how far do we go on urban design? Do we have guidelines and standards? Do we have just guidelines? Do we have nothing at all? How far do we want to go there?
I have a suggestion. Just maybe we don't have to get to that level of detail yet.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe first it's just talking about what do we think about that as a topic, and do you think that's worth at least exploring further? Just an idea.
Well, yeah, I'm not quite following you here. So rather than getting into the finer points of it?
Right, yeah, just maybe it's more overview of the concept, and
Okay.
do we like it or not, and what does that mean? And what I would say too is, at the end of this, I know it's brainstorming, maybe this is all the stuff that staff can take back, and if you guys just keep it high level and we talk about the concepts and the intent or the ideas behind what we'd like to see, then I can take all that and come back with a potential outline of moving this thing forward relative to content, time frame, staff, and all the other, details that I'd rather you guys talk about the high level stuff.
Okay. Well, we have the 5 bullet points. Does that pretty much cover what each individual was talking about this evening? Or do you think there should be, say, another bullet point?
I would just add, I think that's a good list, and I think we should consider each one carefully, and especially on the urban design, bringing in all the new stuff that the city's been doing to the Bellevue corridor from downtown and elsewhere, signage and standards and things like that.
In my opinion, I think that given that this corridor is fairly well built out, I think that if you look at these 5, there's independent and dependent. And I think that urban design and economic development will follow. And if we were to focus more in the corridor study on the trails and open space, transportation infrastructure, and land uses, then the other 2 will sort of follow through market
forces?
and things like that, because there's not much that we can dictate or change.
Well,
I think
Three-quarters of the corridor.
The areas of the corridor as well. The areas along the road are city-owned, but they can go a long way to, promoting design that way.
all the new development that's gone in there recently has had a somewhat consistent style to it. Riverside Downs, Burger King, Englewood, King Soopers for that matter, Home Depot, it still keeps that Littleton brick look to it. I wonder if there was some sort of, whether it was maybe regulation's too strong of a word, but guidance provided by former city staff to say, look, this is what we're looking for in this that we may want to consider from that urban design. But I'm in total agreement that at the end of the day, the market's going to tell us what to do. But if we can put in concrete, so to speak, those different design guidance that's already been accomplished, I think that's great. I've always envisioned Columbine Square as being the other end of downtown. And it's this big old horseshoe parcel that really goes from downtown up through that area and up along Prince Street up to us. So I'd want to maybe pull in some of the downtown neighborhood plans, specifically with the intention of tying into Littleton, not with the intention of being as restrictive as what the downtown plans might be for future development in that area.
I think of the urban design standards and recommendations, if they were focused in on a design criteria for like Columbine Square, that development, and then possibly the redevelopment of that little strip mall behind the Dairy Queen, maybe a different set there, so they could really be quite different for the separate areas that might be or are going to be or might be redeveloped, and kind of just have them focused in on those areas where something's going to change, rather than just applying them to the whole corridor.
Good. Well, but I want to be fair as well to, Home Depot has its own design guidelines that they need to follow. McDonald's looks like a McDonald's. A Freddy's looks like a Freddy's. So we would have to allow for their individual brand that already is an established norm in that area. So say, keep it Littleton, keep it feeling Littleton, but yet make it possible for developers to develop the way that they need to do it.
I think, though, that when you look at some of the, like in Greenwood Village and Cherry Hills, some of the developments that they've put in there look really nice and with a lot of brick, and they kind of, they get away from that standard McDonald's, and I think they have some design leeway to make things look a little nicer. I'm trying to think of some other areas, but Greenwood Village, that shopping center that's on Orchard with the King Soopers, I think it's Orchard and Holly.
Yeah.
It's a really nice center, and it's something that you don't see every day. And for those two redevelopments, that would be a nice thing to start with. And frankly, Home Depot and McDonald's, like I said, they have some leeway in their design. If we have some basic standards that we want to. We want the area to look a little different, look a little nicer, we could add that in there, giving them some leeway to and of course, the
It's
existing
the
buildings, they're
Littleton
not just
brand.
gonna change them, but
The Littleton brand
Yeah,
needs to be pervasive
Yeah.
throughout everything.
that's the way I feel about it, yeah.
Have you ever been to the McDonald's in Aspen? You wouldn't even know it's a McDonald's. And it's nice. You'd like hang out. It's like really unusual. But they obviously are very strong on not having that type of fast food look anywhere in the town of Aspen, so it didn't happen. And it's kind of cool what they did with it.
Here, we're behind, I agree with it 100%. We're behind the 8 ball in terms of what we want to ask for, so we're sort of retrofitting to make sure we still get what we want.
A couple of the projects that you mentioned, those were raw areas that were developed all at once.
Right.
What we have on Bellevue is it's 3/4 reasonably built out, corporate standards, Freddy's, what have you, McDuck's. Home Depot looks like the same Home Depot anywhere in the country. So I would tend to want to tread lightly on standards or guidelines of perhaps we could talk about stepping back from the street or crowding the street if we decide that's what we want, to narrow the street or whatever. Keep it fairly light and general rather than getting into too many specifics.
Yeah, we're not going to
But
change
Mark, I would say
everything.
that the other thing too, to what Andrew said earlier, I think the Home Depot, the one thing that is slightly different about that Home Depot is the brick.
Yep.
It's all brick. So that's not necessarily generally found on every single Home Depot. So I think there are some general guidelines. I think that's what you're saying that could be contemplated.
Yeah, Walgreens had a design standard it followed. Riverside Downs had a design. What was it? And
Right,
let's
yeah,
review it and make
yeah.
sure that we tie in what we like.
There'll be a lot of tilt-up concrete panels on Home Depots and stuff without that kind of, requirement.
I had a slightly different, I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying, I think it's appropriate. I had a somewhat different interpretation of building design, site layout, and healthy communities. I wondered if, we've got an excellent corporate partner in Long Building Systems that's right on the corridor. So much of what goes on, it's not just about facade. The real money on any redevelopment is going to be in the guts of the buildings, is the power systems, HVAC. That can affect site layout, and then things like LEED certifications and so forth and so on can play right into healthy communities. I didn't know if there'd be a potential way to do some sort of public-private partnering where, since this is Long's area anyway, this is where they live, would they act as a resource as part of the plan to say, look, if somebody wants to do something and we're familiar with all of these attributes, we're willing to come in and advise, and if we could approach them to make that sort of an extra carrot for people that obviously if they did work, they'd have to, negotiate terms and conditions, and we're not promoting one business over another. But if we had a way to actually partner up with somebody that already has expertise in this area, it all of a sudden makes the plan a little bit more tangible if they have any potential interest in participating as a way to promote their own business. And it's not something we've done, but it might be an interesting wrinkle on some of these things.
I want to bring up something that you said, Andrew. You talked about the Littleton brand. So if we're looking at 20,000 feet up, the big picture, I've talked about this for years with other planning commissioners or board members. What is the Littleton brand? Can we introduce that on Bellevue, or is Bellevue just going to be what it is?
I think the bridge is what a big opportunity, as Bruce mentioned, that, maybe doing something with that, and if there was any branding, that would be, to me, a nice place to do it. I don't know if there's really a connection down to the Platte River Trail from that bridge, and if
There's a parking lot there on the south side.
Yeah, on the south side
on the Riverside Downs area there is.
No,
It's on the other side of
on the
the-
river, on the west side, on the south side of the bridge, there's a parking lot that has maybe 15 spots, something like that, that connects to the trail right off of Bellevue.
Right by the
You
German,
don't notice it necessarily unless.
Yeah, you can't, it's hard to see, yeah.
right by the
Unless you're
German car
looking.
dealer.
By the what?
German car dealer. The German car shop.
East side. Oh, okay.
It's on the west side of the river.
It's on the west side of the river?
No, it's on the east side of the river.
It's
Oh,
on the
maybe it
east
is
side.
on the east
East
side.
side,
On the
east
east side of the
side,
river.
east side.
That could be, I don't think, I've never noticed that, so that could be enhanced some way so passersby would notice that with a bike sculpture or something,
Of some sort.
Never see it.
Never saw that.
What? It's there.
Never seen it in my life.
And I ride that trail.
Oh, yeah,
Well, what else, again, what is Littleton? Is it what the developers tell us it is? Is it what we want? It comes up in virtually every heavily contested hearing we have in the other room. Keeping Littleton, Littleton. What is it? It's a little bit nebulous here, but is there anything else we can talk about here that would keep this Littleton?
Well, I'm going to throw ourselves under the bus here. In the 2014 comp plan, in the citywide part of it, we have a distinctive Littleton as goal 4. And that was intending to say we want it to look like Littleton. And we have pictures of the museum, and we have pictures of the courthouse, we have pictures of the hospital. Then we have pictures, and all of those have a brick and the old school, Main Street feel. There's also a picture of Bemis Library with this big Art Deco arch to it, which is just as much Littleton as all of the brick that we're talking about. We have a nice vague statement, encourage high-quality design, architecture, landscape architecture, and public art throughout Littleton. But this one, I think, is the nuance that you're hitting on here, Mark. Encourage architecture of place and small independent businesses that differentiate Littleton from multi-municipalities. And it goes back to what we said at the very beginning of the thing. We want our city to be something elegant, it's naturally beautiful. There's just this feel that we have to make sure is maintained in it. And so I don't know if it is a word such as brick, or I don't know if it is a design standard or set of design standards.
It could be scale, it could be heights, it could be all kinds of things.
Or it's pictures of pictures of Littleton buildings, and we say, just make it look like this.
On the Santa Fe corridor study, I remember we included some pictures of rural vernacular, and that has actually been enforced in some of the projects up and down Santa Fe. But there was some good pictures. There was also at the time a lot of the old barns in Littleton, and I was against that. I'm sorry, we're not a 1920s farming village with straw hats and fishing poles. How can we do a sophisticated rural vernacular?
The redevelopment of Corporal Yoga thing, if behind King Soopers, which is a brick building, if somebody wanted to build an Amish farm back there, they could today. And everybody for future generations would drive by and say, what the heck is that? And that's what we have to sort of put a buffer against, to say, look, even though we like rural vernacular and look at Breckenridge Brewery and that whole thing, that is rural vernacular, it's not what we mean right here.
Yeah.
Right here it fits with the retail nuance, it fits with the warehouse district that's sort of behind it, and it ties in with the Littleton downtown neighborhood in terms of its style, so it feels cohesive. I think that's really our challenge to do it, and at that point, throw our hands up and hope the market reacts nicely to that.
Anyone else on well, we kind of get into maybe a little more specific than you were after. Okay.
That's great.
But yeah, I think, we talked a little bit about land use and design, and it's sort of setting expectations for those things. I would advocate for sort of talking about mass and scale as part of this corridor study, because if you just focus on land use, you can say multifamily, and that could mean a 3-story walk-up, like you see throughout apartment complexes, or it could mean a 13-story building. So scale is sort of an important thing in the corridor.
By the way, speaking of, you're alluding almost to zoning, the existing zoning. So if you all get a chance, I think everybody's got a zoning book. You should, if you don't. Yeah. Oh.
You know what? Actually, I would offer that the best place to go to find the current code would be online. We've moved away from books because as we update the code over time, the books are no longer current. So, but our code is absolutely online. You can get on your tablets too, but I can give you paper if you want. But that's generally where we direct people.
Take a peek at existing zoning used by rights. what does a B2 allow? What are the other areas there? There are some PDOs or something along there as well.
PDO.
Anyway, take a peek and see, that definitely plays into this corridor plan. Well, we're at 8:10. What else do we want to talk about here? Economic development, what kind of retail? Do we want to get into what kind of retail we would like to see there? Although the market will dictate as well as the needs of the community will dictate.
Yeah, I would agree that at least, if nothing else, that the economic development is going to be, it's really hard for us to say, we want to see this or that. We've been down this road before many times, that a developer's going to come in no matter what we say and build what can be sustained.
But is there some, what's the word, worth, because you know immediately that the neighbors, when they come in, they're going to say what they would like, an ice cream shop, a bicycle repair place, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. They'll come up with that. They'll spend half the time talking about the kinds of retail they would like.
Yeah.
We could include a list of those, but obviously we're not going to dictate that, sorry, on this parcel behind the King Soopers, this has to be an ice cream store. It won't happen.
Just with almost everything else, we can include what the neighbors say they want to see, and that definitely goes to dictating what the market will bear. If somebody wants to shop at a bike shop that has personal bike repair, or if somebody wants to see a certain froyo shop that's not there right now, that's certainly, developers do that all the time. They look at the gaps in the market and where people are spending their money. And so, that's, if we want to add a list of things that the neighbors have said that they want, then.
Brings up an interesting point, because in the past, with Chris Gibbons, before everybody else's time, he was the economic development director. Right. We'd have all these meetings where he did the analysis of where spheres of influences are and what were holes in service. It was quite interesting. I don't know how far we want to get into that. That could bog us down another 4 months. But what are holes in services provided? And Office Max would be great. Back in there in Riverside Downs. But
if we're looking at a 20, 30, 40-year plan here, things are going to change over time, and people are going to want things that they didn't want before. They're going to, things are going to go by the wayside. So it'll be really hard to make that current, for all time.
Yeah. By the way, that was another piece of homework I want to introduce somewhere down the road. Is I spent a couple hours just thinking, what's your vision of Littleton 30 years from now? It was an interesting exercise. Of course, if you can think about it, you can do it now. But what is Littleton going to look like in 30, 40 years? And then we take a look at that list and see where we're headed as a planning commission. We doing the right things. 100 years ago, the leaders of our community made some really good decisions that made Littleton what it is today. It wasn't all haphazard, some of it was. So with that list, what can we do to make Littleton more viable in the future? So, let's see, we talked about trails and open space. Transportation, we have some good notes here. About traffic and bikes and pedestrian safety. Let's see, land use. What do people think about? There's obviously a big push these days in all parts of our city and all around the metropolitan area of putting in medium to heavy dense residential units. You see that happening, you see the pressure of that on Bellevue.
I think we have to be careful with that. If it's already zoned for business, you have to think about the purpose of business, of course. It's the bread and butter of the city. Mm-hmm. So do we want to get rid of business areas to make residential? when you go from revenue going to the city versus revenue coming out of the city.
And for a long time, there was a line in the sand. The city always said, no, we're not going to rezone any of our commercial property. We need the commercial property. That was a long time ago. It's happening where it's now there's been some rezoning to residential. Another reason for looking at the existing code is it does allow for, in a B2, allows, depending on your interpretation, 50% residential in a B2 zone.
And parking can be commercial.
I'm sorry?
And parking can be commercial.
Which is,
as we know.
Figure that one out. So yeah, I agree, you have to be careful because the economic viability of the city is.
And we have cycles and swings. Right now, residential is being pushed, but do you want to change everything to fit what's happening now when you go out of this cycle and you get into a different cycle?
Yeah, this is what I don't know what the answer is, but good points. What's the next cycle? Going back to mom and pop, what do you call it, brick and mortar buildings, or is retail brick and mortar gone and it's all online?
Drone delivery.
Anybody else have any thoughts about the push for residential?
Yeah, I have one more thought. I just listening to a story on the radio this morning, just talking about how just the lack of affordable housing, and I know most people don't want affordable housing, and if affordable housing can be market rate, it's just that, or not, maybe not market rate, but you've got nurses and teachers and people who have full-time regular jobs who can't afford housing now. And they're being pushed further and further away from the city. So just Colorado's growing, and it's going to keep growing. There's going to be more cars. There's going to be more people. We're not keeping up with the demand for housing, and especially housing that is lower middle class. And so, to consider that, I think, is important.
I would think in approaching this with a niche attitude or intent, east of Federal, the Core Power Yoga area, I think is capable and has like adjacent properties that would accept more density. There's apartment complex right behind there between the dump and everything else, and Plat 56 and the RV park and all that. There's a nice place for it. And it is consistent with the uses around it. I think this is a huge point that should be screamed to the mountaintop is consistent with the uses around it. However, the Columbine Square property, the uses around it are R2. And I would say absolutely not. Would that be an appropriate transition from one to the other? All the way up to Federal. If you were next to Federal, maybe you can adapt to higher density. But our two main arteries are Bellevue and Federal, and so you pack them in near the places that they can get out the fastest. But you do nothing to hinder the feel of those neighborhoods.
What's the feeling of, I drove it and drove through, what's it called, Terra Vista Apartments. That's a pretty large complex of.
Behind Walgreens?
No. Terra Vista, it's south on.
Oh, right, off Federal.
Yeah, it's on Federal, but it abuts the, kind of an R2 area, and it's got some nice greenery, some nice open space, got some amenities.
It's set back at a decent level to the neighborhood.
And it's got mature, obviously, it's been there a while, it's got mature landscaping. So it does, there's, not that I'm advocating it, but there obviously are some areas where the 3-story apartment complexes are immediately adjacent to R2 areas.
Well, and
with good buffer. There's a huge ditch between the two properties.
Yes, drainage area.
It really does make it feel separate.
If I'm living in that house that's abutting that Columbine Square, though, I don't want to see another shopping center where I'm looking at the backside of a dumpster. I'd rather see open space, townhomes, kind of like we wanted to see where the growth is going in, where it kind of looks like the properties that are next to it transitioning into maybe higher density towards Federal. That would look okay, and it, and maybe mixed use as well, having retail kind of along the road. I mean, I don't know what somebody would come up with, but like I said, I'd rather have residential, maybe some people don't, versus, the backside of a business where it's dusty, dirty. I mean, I drive the backside of shopping centers and they don't look good. And Columbine Square is no exception. It looks worse than it should look now, but that's just my feeling. I mean, I know that some people have been against, we've heard this a lot, some people have been against any rental properties, maybe it's condos instead, but any rental properties near single family because, God forbid, lower income people live there. And, the teachers of Littleton hate the kids who live in those centers, things like that, if you know what I mean. People come out of the woodwork and they don't want that stuff in their backyard, but like I said before, we need more housing, so.
Let me bring up something that when we did the Littleton Boulevard corridor study, it was from basically the tracks to, where was it? Windermere, maybe a little bit east of there, but then it stopped. So it was a pretty defined area. But we kept it fairly general but then when we got to Woodlawn, we had a lot more specifics for that little area. And some of it was pie in the sky. I thought it was a really good way of redeveloping that center, very vibrant. So we went from just general on the corridor until we got the Woodlawn. Could we perhaps do something like that in this case where we pick Columbine Square and get a little more specific, saying some of the things you just said a few minutes ago?
Like the sheriff's site.
Yes.
That was very specific in that plan.
Yeah, it was that site was specific with setbacks and all, step backs, but then Woodlawn, we really zeroed in. That might be something nice to do with, because it's obvious that is the key to the corridor is Columbine Square.
Well, it's still in that lift zone, isn't it?
Yes.
That's still active,
Yes.
right? So, yeah, I think that's.
Is there any merit
that's completely
in
appropriate.
doing that?
In the interest of having an opinion, I don't see that it hurts us to put one down on paper.
Yeah.
Whether it's legally binding or market driving, who knows?
Right, who knows? Yeah.
But
But
it
for us
sets
to
it
go
up as a
ahead and
preference.
dream one up, sure,
Yeah.
that'd be fun to do.
Not get too specific, we want 50% brick and that kind of stuff. That's not our.
No, but it would be, I'd like it to be consistent with our tools. I'd like it to tie in the Arapahoe County property. I'd like it to be very nature-oriented. I'd like to maintain the setbacks. I'd like to incorporate some sort of mixed use. I'd like it to have a restaurant that I want to walk to. I'd like it to have all those. I would relish the opportunity to just go ahead and spout off what we're looking for.
Well, we have an opening for a consultant. Would you?
You don't want me doing
Too expensive?
We'll talk after.
it. It won't turn out right.
Perhaps that's something we can talk about a little further. That to me would be, I think, a valuable piece to this corridor. Okay. Well, let's finish up here. Again, I think what we were looking for was information to develop this skeletal outline. Any other last thoughts that anybody has? Hopefully we've given, Jocelyn, hopefully we've given you some information to get going on this.
Great, yeah.
Okay. Any last comments?
Yeah, one item, we didn't talk much about economic, what'd you call it? What was the last page?
Economic development, retail office.
Yeah.
or-
Well, it said value capture at the end. Page 31 of the McCaslin plan talks, they've got a table in there having to do with fiscal impact. I don't have any idea what assumptions were made when they did this based on the plan that was developed, but I thought it was interesting that and it goes to sort of the implementation side of this whole thing, that if we're going to try to put a plan together with attributes of the stuff that we've talked about. In theory, there's some enhancement for the benefit of the citizens beyond just, doing streetscape and doing trail access and so forth and so on. And it might be interesting to understand how, who was this, Louisville? Yeah. Was able to estimate the fiscal impact from a corridor plan or small area plan. I think I would find that to be an interesting element of, I have no idea how we would necessarily gauge it, but if we understood what their thought process was, perhaps we can mimic it and come up with some estimates that says, look, maybe if we did everything that we're talking about in this plan, maybe it costs $5 million. But we can see a way clear to how it might generate $10 million. Obviously, I'm making up numbers. But it seems like that's a reasonable piece of information to sort of cogitate on.
Along with that, why aren't the properties, why are the pieces of dirt sitting as piece of dirt? What is the market barrier that's preventing these things from growing? Why is Lowe's a destination and the entire front aspect of Lowe's nothing?
Right.
And has been nothing for 10 years. Why is the Core Power Yoga on a very vibrant strip mall with 50,000 cars a day or whatever it is, not meeting a market demand of putting the right stores there? Why is that not happening today? What are we missing?
So, some of it's the owner, the property manager,
Possibly.
things like that.
Architecture is
Yeah.
kind of.
Distance from the road.
Yeah,
Hidden.
stigma, the property, and I think that goes to the owner, the property manager, if they're not keeping it up, improving it, painting, replacing brick, that center doesn't look good, it looks tired.
What assumption did the guy who built Lowe's, and I'm assuming owns the rest of that property, make? When the plan was probably first submitted, it had a big box retail, and it had a couple pad sites, and then it had a couple whatevers. Why didn't those whatevers ever take off?
A little bit like on the Prince Street townhomes that they built. We had that, when they came in for the rezone on that, they said that was, I forget what it was, a B2 or something? Or it was a business zone that they said got orphaned because Walgreens went in and cut off visibility to that, so you couldn't
Plat
get.
56.
Huh?
That was Plat 56.
Right.
Yeah, you couldn't put a business in there that was gonna, because they had nobody could see them, kind of thing. That might be one, that's certainly one reason based on, these things, even just looking at this map, some of these things, like the ones next to King Supers, they're pushed back north-south, they're all stacked to the north, and, I've heard of the RV storage before. I don't know if I've ever seen it. Yeah. I've never gone looking, but it certainly isn't obvious.
It's big.
Is it? Yeah. I'll try to take a look at it tomorrow.
I think if you go up and down Broadway and look at the old shopping centers, the ones that are kind of
they're all set back.
flopping in the breeze are the ones where they're set way back, and you might have a pad or two in the front that block the view. The old center where the solid grounds is.
Yeah, wow, they got a car dealership.
Yeah, it's all
there.
blocked, and
Yeah.
that has something to do with it. It's got to have, where the yoga place is that has to be some of the effect, is because it's just kind of blocked by the DQs and T-Mobile or whatever. Those little pads that are out front.
Mattress firm.
So the overarching point is, what is prohibiting these sites from growing today? Why? What is it? The property owner? Is it the market? Is it bad stores?
Yes.
Is it grandma died 20 years ago? What's the holdup?
Probably all of the above. We could get specific if we need to talk to them, but yeah.
Well, I think we should. I think this is a small enough area.
I think you're
We
right.
should be talking to all of these. There's probably 40 names on the list.
Yeah.
And we should be talking to every single one of them.
Yeah, we gotta reach out.
Talking about the business owners then.
Business owners, property owners.
Yeah, or guys that rent the space.
And the job for the consultant is to say, what's the real estate need that is missing in this area? And what is the market, retail, shopping, office need?
Versus what the neighborhood is saying, what they want, and then the business, what do they see the problems are, what would they like? Be interesting to see see how the two clash.
Much smaller scale, where City of Amberwood Center is, was that Cinderella City?
Yeah. What they did in there and allowed vehicles to get in, and I think it, the parking, little pocket park, things like that. I don't know if there's enough room there, but maybe there's some ideas there that could be looked at and see if there's some aspects of that could really benefit this corridor.
And that's an interesting one to pick, because when you do get back into it, you find there's a lot of spaces that are available that have never, ever been
On their main
rented
street.
and that is something that you would, of course, want to avoid.
Well, it's buried, and
And it doesn't have
it should have
horribly
had.
good parking
Yeah,
and
it should have had
different
twice the number of apartments. It doesn't have the.
visibility.
Doesn't have the.
Doesn't have the,
support from
right,
people
right,
who
which
are
is
not
why
units.
if you know, on the other side, so they are building that, it's on Broadway, so the other side, the other entrance into that area, I recently found it by mistake, because you don't really see that at all, just driving on Broadway, right? But they're building some apartments, to your point, that's my understanding, is that there's not a lot of base of people
Yeah.
to support a lot of the
And
businesses in there.
I had coffee there at that corner coffee place.
Right,
There was
Nixon's.
at least a third of the shops were just
Yeah, you
empty.
walk through there
I haven't
and
been
it's
there in a while.
desolate.
I thought they were kind of more built out.
Yeah, it's been moping along for years. It never,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an example of what you don't want to be.
Well, it's an attractive
Yeah.
development, and it's got light rail right there, so if you can't make it work with that type of infrastructure.
okay. Any other last comments?
Lowe's actually owns that site in the vacant lot behind the Burger King. There's a Discount Tire and a Burger King right on Bellevue. So they probably, their site selection guys were thinking of Santa Fe and the view they get from Santa Fe. And that people would,
Backside of the property?
yeah, well, it's all parking, and then there's, and then the building, the part they own is the parking lot, that building, and then there's a little vacant lot in the
There's no signage off.
There's a football field size parcel there that's just sitting, you gotta drive around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lowe's owns that,
So what's the holdup?
they just started developing it, obviously. They don't really have, they don't have any incentive to build anything there.
The Burger King street goes through, the Discount Tire Street goes through and dumps you strangely into the Lowe's parking lot.
Yeah.
And then the Lowe's street goes through and hits a dead end like you're gonna drive
Yeah,
into
it's
the
a
river.
dead end right there, so it seems like there's not as many people driving through there because it like dead ends past the FedEx facility. So I don't know if there's a connection opportunity there to allow more.
I don't know if there is, it's that, you might be able to meander through to, what is it, Shenango or something, where the Humane Society is, and get back out that way, but I don't know, it's certainly not a main thoroughfare.
As it is now, and I don't do this and I don't think it's done that often, to get to Lowe's from the north, you zigzag through a whole bunch of different office complexes
Yeah, that's-
that do connect. You
Okay.
can do it
Yeah,
to get through there.
but again, you gotta wanna do it.
You gotta wanna do that.
Yeah.
But my point in all of this is to say, somebody who knows more about market analysis than I do should be able to tell us, why is that entire parcel, a whole big brown field, that is a donut hole between Lowe's, a successful Lowe's, I think a successful auto parts store, a fairly vibrant car wash and Long, which seems happy where they are. You know, Discount Tire always has 10 people in their conference room or whatever, waiting room.
Somebody would have to approach Lowe's and say, hey, we'd like to build something there, and just,
Or even just to say, hey, what's your market opportunity, or what were you thinking, or what do you want with this?
I don't think they have any. I don't know even why they didn't build parking spaces there. Because it's just it's an improved lot, it's flat. It's delineated, they could put something there, it's just, there isn't.
And yet
I don't
those
think they
office
have any-
complex right behind there looks like they're doing just fine.
Yeah.
Where the CrossFit is, and those look like people use them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're nice.
Maybe it's just the visibility that prevents somebody from saying, hey, this might work, because you can't see it from Bellevue. The Lowe's works because you can see it from Santa Fe, but that little space, you can't see it from Santa Fe, Bellevue. You have to know it's there or go back there.
And I'd argue the Burger King's underperforming too.
It could be, yeah. Of course, I would never go there, but
That's why it's underperforming.
that's just me.
So I mentioned our homework is to walk, bike the site, drive the site. I'll drive that area. I'm not familiar with Lowe's and to the north of Lowe's.
If you want to go, I'll go with you. I'll tell you what, I've been driving this, for 15 years, I've driven this road 6 times a day.
I just want to make one
You
comment
have to
towards the
register
end.
if you two go together, though.
No, that's only 2. I think you have to have 3 to register. So I was quite surprised that we spent the whole evening talking about Bellevue Corridor. All the information that I'd got was on Santa Fe, and that was the focus that I thought we were going to be talking about tonight. Now, I am one who had the problem with being able to get information on the iLegislate, but to come into a meeting where the whole conversation is on Bellevue Corridor and not have been told and be completely unprepared it's been an interesting experience, but I don't feel like I was able to contribute because I had no clue that this was on the agenda for tonight. So I just throw that out as perhaps that was a communication that we'll talk about next, but for myself, I would have preferred to have had warning to be able to study this and take a look at it. It's not an area that I drive through very often, so I don't feel like I was able to contribute much therefore.
On the agenda, I thought it was pretty clear that the council wanted Bellevue looked at first.
Well, when you look at the agenda on what we received as we were going to be talking about tonight, that's what
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, let's spend 4 minutes on Santa Fe. What do you see? You see starting Bellevue?
So I apologize if there's an issue about iLegislate. In the staff communication, the intention was to focus on Bellevue, and if you were able to read that, and maybe that
And I
was
didn't
part
get
of the
that.
problem.
I did
So-
not get a staff communication, so that's probably where
Right,
that
so,
fell through
I'm
for
not
me.
sure so I guess we can talk about Santa Fe if we want, but the intention was for Bellevue in the 2017 budget, that is correct. Council said Santa Fe and Bellevue. In their retreat recently, the focus they had brought forward was to start with a priority on Bellevue. That's where we landed, Robin. And so I do apologize because it does appear that there's some electronic issue, and that was the second thing. And we can talk about Santa Fe if you want.
It's
That was the.
It's a 6-hour discussion.
Right, yeah, I mean, the one thing about Santa Fe is we do have an existing corridor plan, and we do have existing general design guidelines that generally are being used when new projects come in. So we do have that, but I do agree that that is a priority that we did talk about, and that was in the budget. Council's just shifted, like in the next 5 months, what do they want to see started on? And so Bellevue had been their intention for the reasons we talked about, probably Columbine Square and the Columbine Center, or Columbine, whatever that other one is to the north. So.
Are there any new development proposals for the Ensor property, the Triangle property, or any other parcel along Santa Fe?
I'm not sure what the Triangle property is, but
The Ergen property right at Bowles in Santa Fe.
Just north
no,
of.
not that I'm aware of for that.
So-
As you know, the Ensor, the southern group, has an active application, yes.
Say that again, please.
The southern 70 acres. It's being sold into 2 parcels, or it's being sold, what we understand, to 2 developers. There's the north 30 and the southern 70 for whatever, a couple acres in there, but that's generally it. And we have an application for the southern group, and I think there's one coming in to split the lot for the north group.
Within current zoning that is on that property?
The southern group is making some amendments to their PD.
So that will come before us?
Yes, yep. Both properties are in a floodplain, and so special exceptions are approved by Planning Commission as well.
Any estimate as to when it might come before us?
No,
None, probably, okay, wouldn't think so.
yep.
These two PDCs down here?
No, it's bigger than that. It's 110 or so acres, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, it's, yeah, and above. So that's generally, that's,
It's all of it?
yeah, yeah. With being split north 30, southern 70 generally. So,
Okay.
that's that. So I did want to have one more discussion about electronics, and was anyone able to find the information on iLegislate? You were.
I got an email with the packet.
Right, we sent out an email with the packet, correct?
I also looked it up on iLegislate, and I have all the PDFs on iLegislate.
Really? You got iLegislate. I got nothing from iLegislate.
Okay,
I just got the city website and just the
Yeah.
meeting agenda. It's all attached to that as well.
right, so you should be able to find all the documents that way, so I can walk people through it to make sure in case this happens again.
Denise emailed them too.
What?
I got an
Yes.
email.
Yeah, and we send you an email. We try to offer it in 3 ways. I legislate the email, and then you can always access it through the city's website. So I can certainly walk anyone through that to make sure that you can find it. But I am interested in the iLegislate. So you found it, but it doesn't sound like anyone else was able to access it that way.
I was able to access it this evening when I logged in, but I don't recall being able to find it on iLegislate using my
Earlier.
home network.
Got it. Okay.
I will second, I usually do what Brian does and go to the city website. I find it far easier to navigate everything.
Got it. Yeah, yep. All right, well, I will check into the iLegislate with our IT department and see if they have some ideas. And certainly let me know, I can walk anyone through how to find it on those other 2 aspects. So, because my intention is not that someone can't find a packet at all, so.
One thing I did have to do is hit the little refresh button on the bottom to get it to come up with the most current info. It doesn't always just automatically pull that up.
Oh,
There's
okay.
like a little circle with an arrow at the bottom left, and at least
Okay.
I just hit that, and then all the current, including tomorrow's study session with council, came up.
Okay, well, I'll make sure we've got the appropriate directions for everyone too. So, okay. I appreciate the honest feedback. Thank you for that very much. Great, and I guess the last thing, sorry, Mark, I'll let you do that. So your June meetings, you have full case hearing agendas. You have agendas. So as far as the next study session, we're a couple, as soon as we can, I'll bring this back, but it may just be a couple, because we have some case hearings that are,
So we have, the next 2 meetings, we have full agendas,
at the moment, yes, unless something falls off.
3 or 4 cases in one of them?
Yes, yep, for both.
Can you tell us what they are, or do we have to wait?
You know what, I can't remember off the top of my head. Let's see, the next one, no, I'm sorry, I'll send it to you. I sent it to you in a tentative calendar, so you should have that, and I can send it again. It's an amendment to a PD south, it's behind the World Venture building. So that's 2 of the applications, and then there's a PDO. There's 2 PDOs, I can't remember which is which meeting, but there's 2 PDOs coming forward, 1 on each meeting. And then there's a Curtis Street, another PDO as well. So I'll send it to you, but yeah, there's some good stuff coming forward for sure. Busy.
No more canceled meetings here. We have a full
I
slate.
feel pretty good. We haven't really been
No, it's
canceling
good.
meetings at all, so I think we're doing pretty good.
There was a
So,
time.
There was a time,
so, yeah, okay.
Met every
Great.
3rd time.
Good comments, you guys. We'll take it all back and come up with a semblance of a plan, and that'll be our next topic on this. on this.
Thank you for your comments, it was great. And you'll be the Santa Fe expert when we finally talk about that.
I remember anything by then.
You're ahead of the game. And I love talking about Santa Fe corridor. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
I don't need to know, stars are supposed to shine so bright on me, but they don't shine bright.